So, where we started our conversation last time was talking about WhatsApp and specifically about the idea that privacy is gone. And then I kind of we talked a little bit about how maybe privacy was never there in the first place when it comes to technology. That from the beginning everything's been recorded and captured and whatnot. And what I think is interesting to consider about that is the nature of reality and how, assuming there's a divine being and that we're in a divine reality and that it's a benevolent situation, not a malevolent one. And this is something I talked a little bit about with Tony, as you probably saw, that the idea that at the largest scale, if you step back as far as possible, that there's a benevolent force that created the entire system, and that within that system is this benevolent Wetikó energy that seemingly runs our reality, but that outside of that is something benevolent. And so therefore there's the potential to look at Wetikó as something that has a benevolent purpose in the long scale, in the entire stretch of the game, when the game is over completely, or the whole unfolding of reality is complete, that it'll be seen that this horrible, malevolent, terrible thing is actually serving a divine purpose that we can't see in the first person view, that we have to look at it from God's eyes, or whatever you want to call it. So within that idea, privacy is actually something that never existed in ever in reality, because all things at all times are being seen and collected by the creator, and that the purpose of being here potentially is for those experiences to play out to what end, who knows, but that privacy itself as an idea never existed. And it's part of the illusion that we perceive ourselves as separate, and that we think that what's going on inside my head is private and no one knows about it. But I've aligned with the idea that, well, of course, spirit knows about it. Spirit's always here. Spirit's always part of the entire equation. So there's nothing, in fact, most, if not all, of the thoughts that come through my mind are from spirit, not something that my subconscious mind is generating or something evil is trying to put in my head. That everything comes from spirit. And every thought I have that comes through me, the part of me that's considering the thought, that's recognizing the thought, oh, that's an interesting thought, and then I'm chewing on it. That's me, the ego version of me. But it's not private. It's not private conversation going on in my head the way that I feel like it is. And so if this evil cabal that runs the world is actually potentially a group of good guys that know the longer story, and that they're doing everything they can to push us down and control us because they know that's going to wake us all up, and they're sitting around in these think tanks just like, fuck, what do we have to do? Like, how are we going to wake these people up? I think of them as that maybe they're the good guys, the secret good guys that are playing the role of the bad guy to help everybody, and so they're just like, well, let's do 9/11. That'll wake everybody up for sure. And then they do 9/11 and they're just like, oh, fuck. People aren't seeing it, like, what do we got to do next? And then they throw COVID at us, and like, who knows what's next? It'd be even more horrific, but eventually it's going to cause people to wake up. And I see that trend. Certain number of people woke up because of 9/11. Way more people started waking up because of COVID. It does happen to be that way, that the more people are pushed down, the more people wake up, So I know that's a lot of things to talk about all at one time, but
No, at all. We'll just pick the bones of that, and we go back to the there is no privacy. And I've known for a long, long time there is no privacy. That every thought that we think is monitored, recorded, whatever you want to call it the Akashic records.
Yeah.
Some people call it other things. And I firmly believe that what they've done is they've tried to recreate everything they can artificially, with duplicity, against what is spiritually already there.
Yeah.
So, for example, the recording of a telephone conversation, this conversation was already being recorded on a spiritual level anyway.
Yeah.
But I think they use it, but I don't think I'm of a firm belief that they use it for malevolence rather than benevolence. So, you know, we can go back to the loop of reincarnation as an example. You know, if it was malevolent, then we'd be reborn outside of a loop of revolution, remembering exactly what we did in the previous life. Because to me, that's true evolution. So if I got 8 out of 10 things right in this incarnation, and then the next incarnation, I've only got to then get 2 things right, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we back to it's my truth, your truth, nobody really knows, do we? And as much as I want to be on board with you from a positive point of view, saying, yeah, I get it. You know, they're trying to force us into a better place, a better way of existing, or a better way of living rather than existing. But it's because we are aware of the level of abuse and the level of torture and the level of chaos, it's difficult to comprehend that that is done for our benefit.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for me to swallow. When I know that, as an example, and I use a most horrific example, there are an organization in existence that enjoy sexually abusing newborn babies while it's still attached to the umbilical cord.
Yeah.
So for anyone to say to me that's, you know, there's the philosophy where, well, that baby chose to come into this existence to experience that. And I'm thinking, well, actually, did it? What being in his right mind would want to volunteer to experience being raped by when he's still attached to an umbilical cord? So I find it difficult to even comprehend that philosophy, let alone say, "Oh yeah, yeah, I get that." Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it?
I hear you. The only thing I can say about that from the other side of it is that if it were me before I incarnated and I was given the opportunity, let's say hypothetically, to incarnate and play a role so that the person that's playing the role of my abuser is acting something out to work out their karma, whatever that means. And it's not for me to say what their karma is, but just as an abstraction, in order for that person to wake up, in order for that person to achieve their enlightenment, they have to do whatever they have to do in their journey. And it might involve something like that that's horrific, but it's necessary in the longer arc of their story, whatever the, you know, however many
Yeah, yeah.
lifetimes they have to go through, that eventually they get to the place that we're all coming to. And that all along that path, and they had to be that abuser for whatever reason. I wouldn't presume to know why. But if it's possible that that's true, then someone has to play the role of the abused. And if I were to know ahead of time that my choice to play that role would allow that person to then later reach their enlightenment, I would do that.
Well,
I wouldn't enjoy it, but I would do it.
interestingly, it's only the last 5 years, I would say, that I've changed my attitude towards that, because I used that analogy to justify the abuse that's been projected against me during this lifetime.
Yeah.
You know, and I found myself justifying the level of abuse for the benefit of others. Yeah, so it's like, okay, I'll accept that I volunteered to be subjected to A, B, C, and D because it's for the greater good and for that person to evolve and, you know, reach enlightenment quicker, as you quite rightly said. But then on reflection, as I've gone through the development of my own evolution, I've sort of drifted further away from that philosophy, thinking, no, that's part of how they get away with it on a spiritual level, to justify their actions to themselves. Now, you know, from the point of view of a moral compass, as an example, I know right from wrong in my knowing, which would be completely different to your knowing of right and wrong. You might think it's okay to physically abuse another human being just by walking up to them and punching them straight in the face. You might think that's okay. My moral compass says, well, no, actually, that behavior is not acceptable. Just as an example, because that's how different we all are.
Yeah.
This is where, the majority of pedophiles, they show no remorse because, especially the ones that campaign to reduce the age of sexual consent from 16 to 6 years of age in this country, because they think it's actually okay to have full intercourse with a 6-year-old boy or girl against their consent. They truly believe it's okay. And I remember reading an article about Queen Elizabeth II, who just died. Her private secretary was involved with an organization in this country called H.O.P.E, and it's paedophile something. I can't remember what it was called now, but he was actually part of that organization. They were campaigning to reduce the age of sexual consent to 6, and that was the guy who was the closest to the Queen, So, yeah, I 100% get where you're coming from, because this is your point of these conversations, because we can explore different views, different philosophies, but ultimately none of us, and I know I keep saying this, none of us know the truth.
Yeah.
None of us. It's a best guess scenario, isn't it? We might turn out that this planet, whether it's flat earth or round or a sphere or whatever, it might turn out that this planet was destined to be as evil as it is. I don't believe that. I don't believe it for 1 minute. I believe that everything that was ever any good on this planet has been hijacked by the other side and reproduced and represented back to us as a different version of the very same thing, but with a different energy behind it. So, and this is how I think the majority of human beings fall for it, because it's so close to the original purity of whatever it may have been. Yeah, it's there, but it's not nearly there. It's like the reproduction of a natural plant. The big chemical companies buy the rights to it or whatever, and they reproduce it to within 99.9% of its original form.
Mm.
But that vital ingredient is missing. Cannabis is an example, or hemp.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, when you know yourself, it's why it's banned. Is it legal in San Diego?
It's legal in California, but it's still not legal federally.
Okay.
So it's a weird gray area where it's totally legal, recreational. You can just take your driver's license, walk into a dispensary and purchase cannabis legally without any medical license or whatever, without the need for a medical card like you used to need. But that's just California. Other states, some states it's still illegal completely. Others have medical legality and that kind of thing. Others have decriminalized it, but it's inevitable, in my opinion, at this point, that the federal law is going to change at some point soon, hopefully, to make it legal.
Yeah.
But to jump back to what you were saying about what I have thought about in the past is these people, like I like to use Hitler as an example because he's maybe the worst of the worst, but maybe not. Maybe there are worse people than Hitler, but everybody on a common level thinks of Hitler as like this horrible person. And I imagine what it must be like to be inside the mind of Hitler, to live the life of Hitler, and to, from Hitler's perspective, presumably believe that what he was doing was right. And not only just right, but like divinely guided, the way that I feel divinely guided to do the things I do, believing that what I'm doing is making my life and the lives of other people better, hopefully. But actually, from the outside, what he was doing was horrific. And then I think about, like, how does someone, like you were saying about these people that are trying to change the law to make it legally acceptable to have sex with a 6-year-old, how is it possible that they could think that that's a good idea, right? That that's a positive thing for in any capacity, and
But
yet
it's morally correct.
Right, right. How is it possible? And I would suggest that it's not. It's not more. There's no outcome where it's morally correct, with the exception that since I don't know the whole entire divine plan, I can't possibly know how this thing in the largest possible scale that ends with a happy ending, well, it has to be morally correct in order for that outcome to be achieved, even though it doesn't in the moment, or it maybe anywhere throughout it until the very last minute, seem morally correct. Or maybe not morally correct, but somehow acceptable. I don't know, but it doesn't seem possible. But my point is, what it must be like to live inside the mind of one of these people, believing that they're doing the right thing, and how maybe that's some sort of reciprocal situation, that their life involves living this way, believing that what they believe because of things that, if there are past lives, they had these experiences in past lives where they were the abused, and now they have to be the abuser to balance out the equation, that kind of thing, like that the reason that these people exist the way that they do, and they seem so completely evil, and to themselves they don't believe they're evil, is that there's something else playing out that's bigger than their individual lifetime, that speaks to the balance of the equation over the long story, that. And in that way, I can have empathy for that person, because I wouldn't want to live that life. I wouldn't want to be inside the mind of a psychopath and believe that I'm a good person. That seems like the hardest, most torturous life to live of all lives, because you believe you're good and you're actually evil according to the outside world.
So
And
if we create a scenario then, right, you've got a 6-year-old daughter and your indoctrination is trust the plan. That's essentially what you're talking about, is trust in the plan, right? But
yeah.
somebody in an organization which you were part of and I'm part of is saying, no, yes, I know I can't explain it to you, but you must trust the plan. And then you have to stand back and allow your daughter to be sexually abused by it's not going to happen, is it?
not,
Because
not in my lifetime. Not in my lifetime,
oh,
because
so
of the
your
lifetime
moral
I'm living.
compass, every instinct in your body is screaming at you that it's wrong.
Yeah.
So imagine how that little girl is feeling.
Yeah.
And what's happening here is children, babies are being forced into adulthood to justify somebody else's desires. Okay?
For
So,
sure.
so in this country at the moment, especially in Wales, there's a massive drive at the moment where the education system is ramming sex education down the throats of 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds.
Yeah. It's
They're
happening here
bringing,
too.
yeah, well, it's part of their plan,
Right.
because once it gathers momentum, and then the steam train is out of control, just like everything else has been forced down our throats, it'll be accepted. It might not come down from 16 to 6, but it could come down to 12. In some religions in the world, as you're probably aware, as soon as the young girl menstruates, she's ready for sexual intercourse. So, and they firmly stand by that, because that's nature's way of showing that the child is ready, or the little girl is ready. Myself, no, I didn't accept it with my daughters, and I wouldn't accept it for somebody else's daughter.
Yeah.
Because I believe that the important thing here is consent.
Yeah.
And determining how old a child can be considered of capable of giving or not giving consent.
Yeah.
But we're moving away from it. I just want to come back to the Hitler thing, because this is a very contentious subject, right? Because there's a lot of evidence out there, and a lot of people have produced evidence after evidence that the Holocaust was a hoax. So there wasn't 6 million Jews that were exterminated. But if you look at Joseph Stalin's record and the Russian Revolution, we're over 50 million Jews.
Yeah.
But no one ever talks about that.
Yeah.
Because the focus of attention is always on Hitler.
Yeah.
Which makes you think then, okay, I need to look a bit deeper here and have a look at the evidence of this hoax. And one of the great sources for that, as we've spoken in the past, is Jason Breshears.
Mm-hmm.
But there's lots and lots of more evidence about it, but no one ever talks about Joseph Stalin.
Yeah.
because that war was funded by the Rothschilds as well.
Yeah.
That's how Russia went from um it had its own royal family, the Tsars. We went from that kind of fundamental existence to communism. And I for a long, long time, I was interested in communism until I actually understood that it was very, very similar to capitalism.
It's another ism.
Yes, another ism, and the only people that benefit is them.
Yeah.
It's never ever been us to benefit. If
Yeah.
you follow the money trail and just ask a simple question: who actually benefits from this situation?
Yeah.
We spoke about Cuba previously, but yeah, no, I just wanted to mention the evidence of the hoax
Yeah.
of
I appreciate
and
that.
the Joseph Stalin thing. You know,
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that. I'm aware of that research, and that for me, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there.
we were
I
there.
know, I just know it was fucking horrific
Yeah,
on both sides. The
yeah,
whole continent was a mess, you know, and there
but
was atrocities everywhere. But yeah,
yeah,
The Russian story is definitely the one that's suppressed the most, and the one that where the most death and destruction took place, without a doubt.
but also you can take it a step further again because we've talked about slavery in the past, and there were far more white slaves. You have a look at the slavery in the Irish from
Yeah.
Ireland, where they were forced all over the world to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, by white slave masters.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think it's always fair to try and give another spin on the spin,
100%. 100%.
because I think that opens your awareness up then to a different possibility as well. You know.
Yeah. Well, and that's in line with why I want to talk about this idea, the silver lining idea, because whatever the horror is, there's always going to be reason to focus on it and say this is wrong, this shouldn't be, and so many amazing people out there are focusing on it, and it's part of my work too. It's a big part of my website is to talk about the darkness, and just, that's the discovering process of the darkness, and it's essential. We all must find a way to look at the things we don't want to look at, because what you don't know can hurt you, and what you don't know definitely can hurt you. And through us, we can hurt others through that ignorance and that shadow. So it's part of the story, but it's not the whole story. And I think so many of us get stuck in that and focusing on that, talking about it and trying to make people aware of it, and just, you got to see this, you got to look at this. And where I where my journey has taken me is beyond that part of my process, and into the place where at the end of it, all of it, if I believe, which I do, that there's a benevolent force behind all of this, that love is the answer and the outcome to all of this stuff, no matter how dark it is, that we're going to eventually reach a place, and maybe not in our lifetimes, I hope so, but we're going to reach a place as a species where we'll understand that all of this horror, all this darkness was part of our awakening, was part of the germination process to birth our souls into a more divine orientation. I don't know if that's the right words, but so I think it's so important to reverse engineer that. Yeah,
Yeah.
things are horrible. Yeah, things have been horrible. Things are continuing to be horrible, but how do we move through this horror to a place where it's the opposite, and it's utopia or something similar? How did we get there? There has to be a way to get there, and we're headed on that path. So imagining that we reach that place, and coming back from that place to where we are now to see where the path is what I think is so important. And that's where the silver lining is looking into the horror and flipping over the horror to see, how can this be a benefit somehow, even though it seems impossible? How can this lead to the positive outcome? And that's where I want to take it back to the privacy thing, because in a unity consciousness, in heaven or whatever, where there's no privacy, that's where we're headed potentially as a species, is a place of telepathic communication with all of humanity, and where there is no privacy in our minds and all that disappears. And I think of how, what a burden that will be to let down, to let go of, to have to hold privacy as a thing that matters. Because in my imagination of unity, there is no privacy, and there, I wouldn't want there to be privacy. The idea of it itself is just uh, sad, that we're so separated that we feel like we can't share our darkest things, and we have to hide that from people. And oh God, I would never want anyone to know about that. That's my deepest skeletons that are, inside of me. But that's all an illusion, that there is no such thing. That's all part of that darkness, is all part of the germination to lead to a positive outcome. And so the whole idea of taking away the privacy is part of this awakening globally, potentially. And it's the same thing with the new world order, the one government, the one currency, the one religion. They're trying to push us seemingly into this controlled version of what actually is true already about reality, is that we're all one. And so it seems like they're, in their evil intentions, pushing us towards where we're already headed anyway.
Okay, so let's pick up on the we're all one thing, right? You know as well as I do, there's plenty enough evidence out there to demonstrate that at one time, the indigenous population of this globe, this flat earth, whatever it is, we're all one, living in relative harmony.
Yeah.
Okay, you add a percentage of members of whatever society who would the bad apple in the basket, whatever you want to call it, and they were dealt with internally, right? So again, the one was there, it was always there, but every culture had its own independence and lived harmoniously within their culture and with neighboring cultures. They learned how to share, they learned how to live together. Okay, you would have conflict, of course you will, you always will. But now you've got the dark side, should we call it, who are forcing a duplicated version of what was originally beautiful. So this is when I say, like, oh, it's easy for us to fall into that new spell, under that new spell or that new trap, because when you look at the philosophy of having a one world currency, a one world government, whatever, they were always there. The currency might not have been money. It would have been, I give you potatoes, you give me carrots, whatever it may be. So it was always there. So deep down in our DNA, we remember, oh yeah, that ain't such a bad idea. One global security, whatever it may be called. But it's duplicity. It's a cheap representation of what was originally naturally in place. And the only law was natural law. So we'll recreate that, we'll reproduce it and represent it back to you, packaged as the solution. When we know we couldn't be further from the truth. But they tapping into the psychology of those, you call them sheep, call them whatever you want. But whatever you call them, they're still human beings at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And they live in abject fear every day. Fear of losing a job, losing an income, losing their house, losing their car, blah, blah, blah. All the things that don't really matter. Because when you pull them back from it, and for them to look at the debt they've allowed themselves to get into with the mortgage, the death pledge, and a car they can't afford to run, but it looks lovely on the drive next to your wife's brand new car that you can't afford to pay for either. And we go back to the donkey, carrot, stick scenario, because that's how it keeps it rolling. That's all people have to do, is make a different choice, make a different decision for once. But the fear level is so palpable. The level of apathy is I've never experienced ever in this lifetime. So that's all people like me and you do, is lose friends and family, because we are so passionate about, when we've gone down the rabbit hole, to feel the pain, to come back up and say, right, can I talk to you about this? They're like, I've physically seen people I know when I've gone to try and talk to them, put their fingers in their ears and go, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to know. I don't want to know because I can't cope with the truth.
Yeah.
Or a different version of the truth, you know? So they'd rather stay asleep and keep chasing that carrot rather than know they can wake up and just stand still and not chase anything. That's what we're up against. So when we're looking for that silver lining, we are the silver lining, because that's all the majority are doing by making the decisions and the choices, the free choice decisions they're making that they won't even take responsibility for. You know that. Because when you say to them, well, that was a decision you made that choice. Well, no, so-and-so, he told me, and then she told him to tell me, no, whichever way you try to sugarcoat it, when you strip it back to its raw origins, you made that decision. And I've earned the right to say this because I've had to take ownership of every decision I made.
Yeah.
You know, I used to call them mistakes. I don't believe in mistakes anymore.
Right.
Because when I made that decision to do what I did 10 years ago, at that time, I must have thought that decision was the right one to make.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'd have made a different one. So there's no hiding from it, is it? Simple cause and effect.
Yeah.
Because life is simple. But it's made as complicated as possible to keep the majority of us from allowing our awareness to raise, to realize the realize, because the realize are on a daily basis, written and mandated to force a narrative through. That's what we're up against. So it's only fair that we recognize ourselves as silver linings, and everyone like us who's got the courage to openly talk about these things. You know, we could talk about some really deep and dark things that I've experienced, you've experienced, but no one else is going to benefit from that. No matter if they've been through a similar experience, they can relate, but they will never ever understand what I went through.
Yeah.
They can't. It's impossible. Same as it's impossible for me to understand anything that you've experienced, because only you know that, because it's up here.
Yeah.
But that's where the jigsaw puts itself together, just by us breathing, standing back and saying, why? Why have I got to do that for you? And then when you ask yourself that question, you come to your own realizations. Well, I do anyway. That's how I figure things out. Because there is no answer out there for us. Look at all the books we've read. Look at all the YouTube videos we watched. We're still reading books. I'm loving in reading this Fifth Agreement now, because it's all it does. It solidifies what I already know, but it gives it to me in a different version.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's still Wetikó. Big Wetikó.
Yeah.
And it's big Wetikó that is beating the big drum that everyone else is marching to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know that yourself, there's hundreds of thousands of us, little beacons of light, little silver linings, going about our daily work and just having a conversation with someone, or putting your arm around someone, or buying someone. I was somewhere the other day and I could see this guy was struggling to piece together enough money to buy something, you know, insignificant. And I just stepped up and paid for it. And people will never forget that. And I'm not a opium addict. I'm a realist. You know, I go about my daily work, which generates my income. But I can guarantee you, whenever I'm out and about, no matter what part of the UK I'm working, I will have a conversation with somebody, and I know that their life has changed that day, because they're so desperate to talk to somebody different about something different.
Yeah.
And that's the silver lining.
Yeah.
And I remember making a decision, and I told my ex-wife this long before I actually finally found the balls to leave the situation. And she said, well, how far are you prepared to go to get this so-called message out? I said, well, I'm prepared to die for it. What do you mean? She said, you've got two beautiful daughters lying in bed upstairs, and you're prepared to die for this. I said, that's right, because tomorrow morning I've got to face them two beautiful daughters, And when I'm looking at them, the reflection I'm seeing is that I'm killing myself from the inside out by denying myself what I should be doing. But that was part of Wetikó standing in my way of that development. And she used emotional blackmail then, using my daughter to say, well, you got two beautiful daughters up there. I said, I may as well be dead. Because that's all I'm doing on a daily basis is betraying myself. You know, it took me till I was 50, 54 to actually look in the mirror. I'm only 56 now. I'm 57 this year, and it took me up to about 53, 54 to actually look at myself in the mirror. I could shave without actually looking at myself, because I was ashamed of what reflected back at me. I know a lot of that now was my own Wetikó, right? But I had no respect for myself. I look at myself and I was so angry and bitter with myself, you know? And it still catches me out. But then I am my own silver lining. And then when I get the opportunity and to meet people like you and read the books I read, and that just gives you that silver lining. Say, okay, it's another day, let's go again. And whatever comes, comes, you know? But there's not a day that goes by unless I'm here and I don't go over the door, I will meet someone somewhere at a conversation or a word or just a look. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think that's an essential, at least for me, it was an essential part of my journey, that I felt like at a time after I'd been looking into the darkness for long enough that I just felt helpless to change anything.
Yeah.
And I was just like, how, this is too big for me.
Yeah. So
And
what
then I realized,
sorry,
you know, go ahead.
Just to tie that into what I should have said at the end of what I was saying, and what the decision I made was, and I said it to my ex, if it takes me every day to speak to one person every day for the rest of my life, I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah.
And that's all we all can do.
Yeah.
Because if you had an audience like Hitler could command an audience, you're there for a reason, and it's not for the benefit of the people.
Yeah.
Is it? Because individually, it's every individual's moral duty to arrive at a conclusion themselves, because otherwise we just become cult leaders, politicians, or kakistocracy. I love that.
That's a great word.
Yeah, the lowest form of humanity is leading us down the garden path, like lemmings over the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
Come on, follow me. Oops, I'll just step aside, make sure you get over, all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. But yeah, essentially that's where I was going with that, is just I had this realization that actually not only is it not my place to change anyone else, I can't do that. I wouldn't want to. That was the big piece, that I would never, like, looking back on my journey, there were innumerable people that helped me along the way to get to where I'm at, to get to where I was at the time. And any one of them could have, if they could have just reached in and opened my third eye, if they had that ability, they could have done it, let's say. But I wouldn't want that for myself, and I definitely wouldn't want that for anyone else, because it's the journey of having that empowerment for myself that is the sweetest part of the awakening process for me, is that I did that. And if I didn't do it for myself, I wouldn't be able to stand on what I had accomplished. I'd be, like you said, I would end up getting stuck in with Wetikó and trying to become some sort of somebody that people follow. And that's definitely not what I'm looking to accomplish. I'm looking to only continue doing it for myself. And as a result of doing that for myself, if I happen to have conversations with people throughout the day that in reflection, I see that it made a difference in their journey, then that actually, sorry.
And you don't have to look for it.
Right.
I don't.
Yeah, I'm not going out there
guarantee
proselytizing. No, I'm just
See, the
people I
thing
meet.
is, this is what I would try and convey the message to other people. When you walk into a room, I can more or less discern who's who, right? So can they. So when a complete stranger walks up to me and goes, there, I know that their soul can see my soul.
Yeah.
So there's an instant trust there, an instant recognition, where they're comfortable to walk over to somebody they've never met in their life and disclose they're in an abusive relationship with a violent man. I embrace it every time.
Yeah.
And I put my work, what I call my paid work, to one side, and then devote whatever time I can into that individual, just to let them tell me how they feel.
Yeah.
Because they're in their own little universe. Same as it says in the Fifth Agreement, every one of us has got a little universe in our minds. So you're quite right. It's not our place to go and you must do this, you must do that, try this, do this, come into this meeting, follow this guy, subscribe to her. You know yourself how many charlatans are out there who claim to be able to open your third eye.
Right.
Well, actually, that's a violation of privacy on the highest level you can think of.
Hmm.
You've got no business coming anywhere near my mind trying to open my third eye. If I want to open my third eye, I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
If that's something you're into, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You see my point.
Yeah.
But that's how, and then they charge you lots of money for that.
Yeah.
And you know the New Age movement, the spiritual movement is rife with charlatans, where they don't give a flying fuck about you as long as they fee out you for the day.
Yeah.
Because that's what gives them the financial stability, by exploiting the good nature of innocent people. It's as simple as that. That's got to be one of the greatest violations.
Yeah. Well, and I would argue that there's vastly more people out there that are charlatans that don't know that they're charlatans. They
Oh my
believe
God.
they believe
Oh
that
my
what
God.
they're doing is helping people. And they
And
believe genuinely that they're a good person and they're not trying to take advantage of another person, but Wetikó is working through them in their own shadow. And
yeah,
it's
and they, as you know, they all but prepared to die to defend that,
right.
but not quite die.
Yeah.
Just like Paul Levy's father, just like my father, they'll perpetuate the abuse to a point where I can't really kill you because I'll have nothing to feed off.
Right.
So New Age, where they tap into an original, like just like we talked about the indigenous populations, you know, the original nations where it was pure, it was honest, people lived in harmony, and now you've got people who will exploit that by saying to somebody else, "We can live in harmony. I won't exploit you. Just give me your money, and I'll help you open your third eye."
Yeah.
Or lie down there and I'll do a free Reiki session on him.
Right.
And then sign you up to 10 paid ones after.
Right.
It's rife.
That's a big I saw that early in my journey. And I decided back then that whatever I do with this journey that involves what I perceive to be my spiritual work and whatever I share with others, I'll never, ever, ever charge money for it because I don't want to create my own shadow situation like that. And I feel like money isn't the only way that can happen, but it's one of the easiest ways that can happen is that, oh, I've got this vision. I want to help people. I'm going to start a business to help people. And it's always through these good intentions, and then through that, it turns into something dark.
It
And
has to.
I just
Because
I wanted this to remain pure as much as
because
possible.
the tail will end up wagging the dog.
Yeah.
Once you're into that financial pathway where you've got to pay tax a year after or whatever,
Yeah.
then you'll start compromising
Yeah.
your integrity to attract more clients to pay their bills.
Right.
So you're bound to end up on a dark path. That's why I struggled as a businessman for as long as I did. I'm not a businessman. I'm not. How I managed to get away with this since 1997 is another story. but I did, you know.
Yeah.
And I always, and anyone who's ever worked for me or with me will always say to you that they've never worked with anyone or for anyone like me, you know, because I couldn't do it the conventional way, because I didn't have the belief to do it the conventional way. So I wrestled with my conscience all the way through that process, because I was becoming the epitome of what I knew was wrong,
Yeah.
whether it was communism or capitalism. It was an
Yeah.
ism either way.
Yeah.
And because you're governed by the rules that the kakistocracy set up to suit themselves, you're confined and controlled by the very fact, well, if you don't pay your income tax, then you could go to prison.
Right.
I got a lovely income tax bill waiting to be paid now. So I'm not out of it, because
Yeah.
I have no other way of sustaining myself financially.
Yeah.
But do what I do professionally, you know,
Yeah.
for money. Essentially, there's no sugarcoating that. I do what I do for money, to pay
Yeah.
my bills, to feed me, blah de blah.
Yeah.
Because, like you quite rightly said, there's something I'm going to get myself into now when I'm past this next stage of the fallout from my divorce and what have you. And the technology is not cheap.
Yeah.
But I've already made a commitment to myself to purchase the technology to be able to use it. And let's see where that takes me. But I will never do it for money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying that money might never ever be involved,
Right.
because the equipment is £6,000 to start with. But it's not just the equipment and the technology, it's sharing every conversation, every experience. That's where the trust level builds up, in my opinion, is when you're prepared to talk about things that you've experienced, they open up quite quickly.
Yeah.
And they always walk away with something, and that to me is priceless.
Yeah.
And it's great if I'm out and about on my paid work, because I'm getting paid by somebody else, normally their boss, to do what I'm doing, while I'm talking to them about the crap that they're going through.
Yeah.
So it's win-win,
It's a conduit
win-win
to,
situation. Yeah,
it's a conduit for your real work.
yeah, winner, chicken dinner. And I do convince myself of that I'm put in certain parts of the UK at certain times to meet a certain person for a certain reason. But I use that probably to my advantage to justify taking the money, because I'm following the carrot.
Right.
Does that make sense, Joe?
100%. I feel like I align. I can't remember if we talked about this or not. I feel like maybe we did, but I align with the perspective that everything that happens is part of a divine plan. That what we perceive as free choice is an illusion, uh, as part of this entire simulation that we're in to teach us about free will, and that what we feel like we're making these choices is actually like free will with training wheels, and that if we actually had divine free will, this place wouldn't even exist, because we would have destroyed it a long time ago with the power of our free will. And so every single thing that happens at all times, my whole life and all the lifetimes since this simulation started, was already pre-written. And then the play button was hit, and what we perceive to be our individuality, our ego, is like an avatar. Like, we're somewhere else and we're in this experience as if we're in a movie that we think we're controlling, but really we're just watching it on a screen, believing that we're in it. And it's designed from the ground up to feel like it's real, and that the choices that I'm making are real choices. But actually, across the whole arc of the story, once it's over, then all of this will be understood, that it was essential to feel that way as we went through it. But in actuality, it was never true free will. And that in that exists the understanding, for me at least, of why all this darkness is necessary. Because if we didn't see the consequences of the choices we make and how they can potentially lead to the darkness, we wouldn't understand why we need to make the choice for good.
I call it remote control.
Remote control.
Yeah. I've always sort of tried to explain that we are being remotely controlled as avatars, if you like.
Yeah.
So you give in the task and the impression that you've made the decision about that task, but the decision was already made for you anyway.
Yeah.
So then it's difficult then, right, to align that with the philosophy that you made the wrong decision yourself.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Right? Because then when you get to the end of that pathway on your knees, a broken man, like I've been many, many times in my life, and then you get up and say, okay, let's go again. Why subject yourself to that? The pathways I've gone down, and I know from the first step, this is wrong. But I've got to get to the end of that pathway to get off my knees to come back. Yeah, of course I've learned from all that. But then it takes you back to that loop of revolution, then the incarnation loop.
Yeah.
And this is going back to the beginning of this conversation. If that wrong decision, bad choice I made and experienced that, if I came back with the memory of that, then I could buy it. I'd buy it every time.
Yeah.
You say, right, yeah, I remember doing that last lifetime. When we're anywhere near that, what I'm going to do is what I did afterwards. To me, that's true evolution, because otherwise you're stuck on the revolution. Isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, to just step off that loop of revolution, the reincarnation loop, and create your own pathway, your own trajectory. That to me is true evolution. So
that's why I also perceive that the reincarnation trap that David Icke talks about, that so many others talk about, and that this idea that Icke kind of stands on, that if we were truly free, that it wouldn't make sense to have our memory wiped, because I go through this life, I learn all these things, and then my memory's wiped and I start over again, and that doesn't make sense.
it doesn't
Logically, right? But I disagree with that in the course of the entire plan, where it is a divine plan, that it's an essential part of the process to quote unquote wipe the memory, which I don't think is a complete wipe, but it, in terms of allowing a person to have an individual lifetime to learn the pieces of the story that are necessary for the divine tapestry, the whole picture, it would not work for us to remember each previous lifetime, because then we wouldn't make the innocent choices that we seemingly make, even though we're not actually the ones making the choices. But it makes sense to me in that context.
I agree with you. But when you look at the revolution trap, the reincarnation trap, I call it a revolution. I have to, right? Because it's the way that I visualize it.
Yeah, revolving.
It's revolving. It's just like the snake eating its own tail.
Right.
Constantly eating its own tail, reinventing itself every time. No one's learning. We just go around in another circle of revolution.
Right.
But when you go back to Icke and Tony Sayers and the dozens of others, Jason Brescias, and where they talk about the reincarnation trap and how powerful the spell is, I buy into the theory behind that, where we are a constant source of energy for Wetikó. We are the batteries. So it's in their best interest to keep looping us back into another existence. Because if we all woke up to a certain level of awareness and started creating your own pathway of evolution on your own trajectory, they've lost their energy source.
Right.
It's not in their best interests to allow us to have half a dozen memories from a previous incarnation.
Yeah.
Let alone all your memory. They need to keep us suppressed and subdued. They call it a blanket of forgetfulness. Yeah. A memory wipe, complete memory wipe. But when you look at it from the energy perspective, where they feed off us as batteries, then it's a lot easier for me to buy into that. Because I think that on a spiritual level, when we evolve past this illusion, we just go into another illusion. But it's on a higher level. And that's sort of what Jason Breshears from Archaics refers to.
Yeah.
So again, it's not in their best interest to allow us to evolve past a certain level of awareness, because there's no way they're ever going to get us back.
Right.
It's like that ladder that I told you about, the way that I look at it. As we evolve, as we become more aware, you go up another rung of the ladder.
Yeah.
And you earn the right to stay there because of the level of your conscious awareness. Albeit on certain occasions, you have to come down a couple of rungs to deal with something on a lower energetic level, because that's the only way you can deal with that individual on that level, is on that level.
Yeah.
But then you remember you've got the right to go back up 2 rungs because you've earned the right. But their energy level stays here. Can you see that? That's the way that I sort of picture it, you know?
I hear you. And I see
And
that.
that's and that in no way am I saying that anyone looks down at anyone because they're on a higher level, because that's
Right.
what the new age would say. Well, you know, we're all equal, we're all this, we're all that. Well, actually, we're not. We're all different.
Right.
We must be, because we are. Every one of us has got our own universe in our minds. So our level of evolution, our level of conscious awareness has to be different. No 2 conscious awarenesses are the same. They can't be.
Yeah.
They can't, can they? We might be able to relate to each other's, but at the end of the day, it takes you back into yourself, where I'm an individual sovereign being. So my experiences, whatever they are, whether they're relatable to you as, are mine, and only I can know and understand that awareness. Anyone else is impinging on your privacy.
And I feel like that supports the idea of the need for each lifetime to be separate and not have a memory of the previous one, because that is the requirement for that piece of the tapestry. If I'm using the analogy of a thread being an individual lifetime, and they're all different threads creating the whole quilt or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just take that one step further, right? Because what you're saying is, and I agree with you, but if it was factual or even can be evidence that once I've gone around that revolution once, and I experienced the 10 things that I agreed to experience, and after them 10 things, and that incarnation ends, I die, whatever. If my next incarnation then is on the path of evolution, a trajectory on my own, with the memory wipe, but I'm on a level now that I am going to experience them 10 experiences on their revolution, because I'm on a pathway or a journey then to 10 different experiences that I will learn from.
Mm-hmm.
I would buy into that 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, is it? Because we revolve, die, come back, memory wipe, revolve again, die, memory wipe, revolve again, experiencing the same thing in a different way every time. So our conscious awareness, no matter what we learn, is held within. So if you picture a car tire, you're looking at the car tire, and the revolution that I'm on is to the left-hand side. And then when I die, the trajectory of that revolution is shifted to the right just a little bit, but it's on the same wheel. Can you see what I'm saying?
100%. 100%. I love that, actually, that analogy of the car tire, because in that analogy, the place that the tire is touching the ground, to me, represents the lifetime. And so, yes, it revolves around again, seemingly in a closed loop, but the next time it touches the ground, it's in a different place, touching a different lifetime, if you will.
But the
and so
same thing.
I don't see it as a closed loop, a snake eating a tail, because time, it's a spiral. It's like we're touching seemingly the same spot, but we're in a different place each time we touch it. And so that's where that whole tapestry has to be considered, I think, to understand how each seemingly individual separate thing is part of one. And that's, I mean, your shirt says it all, man, common unity, right? Which I love. That. I don't know if you picked that shirt specifically for today.
Yeah, Yeah, it did. Yeah, it's
But
that to
that's where
me,
we all are the same, is that we're all
that's
coming from one thing.
that to me is the antidote to Wetikó.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just I'm going to digress a touch now, right, on car
Yeah.
tires, right?
Yeah.
I've been asking this question for years. Where does all the rubber go?
On the
And
road.
people look at me like I'm mental. I said, where's all of the millions and millions of cars and vans and trucks on the road? Where does all the rubber go from the tires?
Goes back to the earth.
And it becomes airborne, doesn't it?
Well, eventually it does become airborne, but eventually it settles back onto the ground, and that's where it came from in the first place, right?
Yeah, but they chemically enhance the tires are now. They're not rubber, are they? Right. So car tires are actually highly carcinogenic.
Right.
So again, they said that people like, breathing petrol fumes is carcinogenic. Diesel fumes carcinogenic. Anything to do with it's carcinogenic. But every day, and we're all guilty. I'm guilty. I get in my car, turn a key, off I go, knowing there's tires that I'm using, wearing on the road. The kids walking to school are breathing the air.
Yeah.
And it just ties back into how they've used that technology to weaken the immunity of everyone,
Mhm.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, I love that because there's a silver lining in everything, and there's a dark lining in
Everything,
everything.
everything.
But in the analogy, in the metaphor of the tire, I love that question is where does the
There's
rubber
a
go?
rubber go.
Because seeing ourselves as the tire isn't even potentially we're the energy inside the tire. The tire is part of the illusion too, right? And
Yeah,
we're inhabiting the energy of we're the energy that runs through our bodies is the truth. Our bodies are part of the illusion, right? So the tire is manifested from the illusion so that we can experience the illusion, and the tire eventually dissipates and goes back to the earth from where it
yeah,
came. Even if it's chemical, it's still part of the earth, right?
yeah,
It's still part of the
yeah.
material
I agree
world.
with that.
So I love that
But, but
that as an analogy.
it's the same as I digress again now. It's the same as oil.
Yeah.
I'm a simple bloke, right? Self-educated, blah blah blah. I taught myself to read, blah blah blah, whatever. And I used to say to people, if you're going to read a book, have a dictionary by the side of it. Why? I said, because you're bound to come across one or two words in that book that you don't understand. So instead of ignoring the big word or the way that that word presents itself to you, just look it up in a dictionary to give yourself a little bit more awareness.
Yeah.
But more importantly, then learn how to spell it.
Yeah.
But you go back to going back to oil now, right? And for a long time, and as you know, I'm an ex-coal miner, so I mine fossil fuel. And I look at oil as the lubrication for the flat earth or the planet or the globe. And we suck it out of the ground and burn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put it in a car in the form of petrol or diesel. We put our kids in a car. It's the irony of it. We put our kids in a car, drive them to an education system that is part of the suppression and the spell. They breathe in the tires, the rubber off the tires. They breathe in the car fumes and the diesel and petrol fumes. Put them into an education system. So you must do good. You must be a good student. Listen, you're 5 years of age. Your first test is coming up. We are culpable of abusing our children. In fact, you could take we're guilty of what's it called? There's a word for it, something manslaughter by proxy. We're killing our own children by forcing them down the same pathway that we were forced down by our parents, and they did by their parents. And this is where that chain of revolution is going to be broken. And that's what I did with my life, because I was abused by my father. And part of his justification was, well, he was abused by his father. Well, no, that don't make it right. So the one thing I will thank my father for is the fact that he put me through what I went through, because I've managed my life And when I came up to a brick wall and not sure how to get over it, under it, round it, whatever, I think to myself, what would my father do here? And I would do the complete opposite. And 9 times out of 10, it worked. So
Yeah.
in fact, he was probably my best teacher.
Yeah.
When you look at it from a dark perspective. And what I'm saying is, then you can expand that to how we subject our children. I'm telling you now, Pat, right? If I knew 23 years ago what I know now, I would never have ever have had children. Never. Because they depend on us to reproduce.
Yeah.
Like animals, right? So you bring in the new energy into life, and then we subject that energy, the beautiful, innocent energy, to what we went through. Because no one bothers to stop and say, hold on a minute, the system is not working for us. It's working for them. It's working perfectly for those who control us, because you couldn't get it worse. You couldn't get it wrong any easier. Could you?
Yeah.
The way the society is now, right, whether it's San Diego or Haverfordwest in Pembrokeshire, it's a mess. But it's an intentional mess. And the way I defend that is, if it's not an intentional mess, it'd be something different, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It'd be far better than what we got. You know, 8-year-old children being there's a leaflet went around this area. Like, I'm not involved with anything in this area. I don't know anyone, but I've seen the leaflet where adult man and woman would go into the local junior schools. That's the 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. And they were stripping off completely naked in front of the class of children to explain to them the anatomy. They should be out playing football and netball. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Being subjected to explicit visual human beings, not even books or diagrams. There's 2 grown people stood there.
Yeah.
There's murder over there. But it won't stop it, because the Welsh Assembly have voted in favour of the new sex education programme, because they are part of it.
Yeah.
So how do we stop it? How do we give them people silver lining? And the other thing I resent to people is they only get involved when it touches them.
Yeah.
If it was the 10, 12, 14-year-olds, the parents wouldn't be up in arms, would they?
Yeah.
Because it's not affecting their children. We need to become proactive, period.
Yeah.
Not when it touches us. I'll be serious, haven't I?
I think I've talked to you.
Sorry.
I think I've talked to you about my perspective on the nature of the human being, and that we don't change direction until we're forced to.
Yeah.
You know, we're walking down a path. It's a beautiful path. Why would we change direction? I want to keep going on this path. And then there's a cliff edge or a wall. And we don't have a choice. We have to change direction at that point. And that's the only time that humans change, is when that point comes, no return.
It's because the spell is that powerful. We convince ourselves we are comfortable.
Yeah. Because
we see the images of people who were less fortunate than us. So it becomes, I need to be a bit more grateful for I got few more scraps off the table than he got.
Right.
No one should be struggling. No one should be suffering. There shouldn't be any homeless. We shouldn't have this illegal drug epidemic, pandemic worldwide.
Yeah.
And more importantly, have a look at how many people are prescribed junkies.
Yeah.
In this country and every other country.
Yeah.
But because it's prescribed and signed off by a doctor, well, it must be okay for me to take 3 Mogadon and then, or half a dozen Cocodamol, and then get in the car and drive my kids to school, breathing the tire dust. You got to laugh at it, man.
Well, and therein lies the sort of the maddening paradox of, without all of this darkness, we wouldn't be able to awaken.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally inseparable that the traumas I experienced led me to my awakening journey. And without them, I'd just be this ignorant fool continuing on, you know, without that resistance. Let
me ask you a question then, right? Would you consider yourself as being insane?
Do I consider myself to be insane?
Yeah.
I love using the Jiddu Krishnamurti quote to answer that question, which is that it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
So it's insane, eh? Yeah,
Absolutely batshit insane
all of
according to
us.
the Wetikó society.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
all of us.
Yeah.
All of us are perpetuated in our own insanity.
Yeah.
We must be, because otherwise it would be different, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because life is so simple. There's only one problem with the world, and that's the people in it.
Yeah.
Because of the trance of the spell that we just perpetuate the same thing. Force your children, force your grandchildren. And another thing, the MMR job, I would never, ever in a million years allow that anywhere near my children.
Yeah.
I did that to my daughters. And when I found out what I found out about the MMR and its effects, right, I cried like a baby.
Only imagine, dude.
Because I gave my children, two beautiful daughters, to the medical profession in this country. Go on, poison them.
Right.
Pick which one you want to go first. I did that to my children, same as my parents did it to me.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
I'm very grateful that I haven't had children up until this point in my life, but that I feel ready now to bring a child into this world with the opportunity to not be in the matrix potentially. You know, there's the potential there. I would never delude myself to believe that it's not going to happen, because if a child comes into this world, they're in this world, they're going to be in the matrix. There's no. And I've talked to many people who are seemingly enlightened and awakened, and their children are going through hell still, even after all the upbringing of this, this awareness and all these things, they still have to go on their own journey. So I'm still conflicted about it. And it's not really much of an issue, since, I don't have a relationship that's leading to potentially having children anyway. But I at least feel like I'm at a place where I have the opportunity to, if I was going to raise a child, I'd probably want to be off the grid and not connected to society, and give that child a chance to live a natural life, but that's a dream. And I'm just happy I never had that what you've experienced. I'm grateful that I never had to have a realization of what I had done to my child before I knew better.
It's child abuse.
Yeah.
It is. There's no way of sugarcoating it. It's child abuse.
Yeah.
You sign that birth certificate, you relinquish the right to any control over that child.
Yeah.
To the catastocracy.
Yeah.
Hand them over to her. There you go. Another one to feed your energy.
Yeah.
So there you go. The antidote is common unity and stop breeding. If we all stop reproducing children,
there wouldn't be any more power.
The battery would die, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So
I've thought about that too. In the context
say, well,
of,
oh my God, that'll be the end of humanity.
Right.
I'm fucked for that.
Right.
Because what we're all guilty of witnessing and perpetuating is abuse in its own right. It can't go on like this.
Yeah.
For as long as it's gone on, it's gone on for as long as it's gone on. But you got to remember, they have access to just about everything that the good side had access to and more.
Yeah.
They know us. They know us better than we've ever known. I have no idea who I am.
Yeah.
I'm quite comfortable with the version of me right now. I'm quite comfortable with. But deep down, I know my potential is non-exhaustible.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point of how they take control of us. Rothschild said it, get them young, get them forever.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. And we stand back and allow that to happen because we are convinced that it's right. While I go and do my job that I can't stand. Yeah, 5 shifts a week. Recover on a Saturday, get ready on a Sunday to go back on a Monday. That you're telling me that's life or living? It's existing, right? It's existing, and the majority you drive, you see them yourself. Car after car can pass you, and how sad, depressed, and under pressure the majority of people are. But they're doing it to themselves. They're allowing it to happen to themselves because they refuse to analyze a big word in a book they're reading.
Yeah.
or they refuse to turn the telly off and invest in themselves internally. I know because I've done it.
Yeah.
We've all done it. We all still do it. Switch off from that crap for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
We're all guilty by association.
Yeah.
Silver lining. Wipe the slate clean and start again with a different way, or back to the old way, where the only law was natural law, and that was based on morality. Because that's the problem now. There is no morality. There is no moral compass, because people are doing things against their own instincts and then justifying it to themselves, and that's classic Wetikó.
Well, and that's where I feel like the silver lining is something that we have to extrapolate. It's not something we can see from where we're at right here, to see that
Is that a sex toy? An extrapolate?
the I don't think that where we're headed is to go back to something we had in the past. I think it's to create something new that none of us have ever experienced, based on the truths from the past.
Yeah.
Removing all the lies along the way, or not removing, but incorporating all of them to manifest something that has never existed before on this planet.
The majority couldn't cope with the truth, Pat.
Yeah.
I was one of them once.
Yeah.
Exploring little bits of this, little bit of that. And it's like, what the and then you go a bit further and a bit further, and then that's it. You can't stop.
Yeah.
You can't stop, because that again is self-betrayal.
Yeah.
But I agree with him, but it's like this technology that we are handed bit by bit, beg your pardon, is primitive. And I believe, and I still do, I believe that at one point in the past, we could communicate telepathically. This was meant for eating and drinking. And then someone worked out, if we make a noise, like the Fifth Agreement says, we'll give that noise a label or a symbol, and that is to represent a tree.
Right.
And then this then taught itself how to tell lies.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, we are born with the truth. Why would a doctor lie to me about COVID? Because he gets £3,000 for every death certificate he writes. Oh, they would never do that to us, no, wouldn't they? They've been doing it forever. That's why they are in their positions. And I'm not talking about the majority, all of them. There's good and bad in everyone, we know that. And, doctors are just put one part of it, who are ordered to tell the lie. Cacostrocracy. They don't care.
Yeah.
They have no empathy, because they are Wetikó. They are the embodiment of it. And they will do whatever they can, whatever they will, whatever they can, they will say and do whatever to maintain their financial status in society. And that is sad. But I'm quite content with the version of myself right now. So they're responsible for themselves. And that's the other problem with it. When you call them out there, the government, no. It's like a general in an army telling a soldier to go and shoot that other innocent man 100 yards away.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for it? Is it the general for ordering the soldier, or the soldier for pulling the trigger? Soldier pulls the trigger, man dies. Well, he told me to do it.
Right.
It takes you back to the hand in the fire. If I told you to put your hand in the fire, would it? But a soldier,
again, that's to me part of the silver lining.
Yeah.
Is all these seemingly dark things happening to help us eventually reach a place where we understand, no matter what someone tells us to do, it's on us when we make the choice to do it. And that's the
ultimate decision.
That's the alchemy, that leads to a person embodying their or not embodying, but actualizing that awareness that the choice is ours, not someone else's. And that's what I see out in the world more and more. And I kind of rejoice in that we seem to be punting more and more. It's not my fault. It's not me. It's not me. It's not me. It's not me. It's someone else. Blame someone else. Point the finger at somebody else. it's getting worse and worse and worse in that regard, seemingly. But again, I feel like that's leading to a viral awakening, if you will, of personal responsibility, where, like you're saying, people will just all of a sudden stand still and stop participating in these
What are you
choices.
gonna do?
I always use McDonald's as an analogy. You know, if everyone decided globally to stop going to McDonald's all at the same time, McDonald's would just simply disappear.
Yeah.
They'd go out of business. We
And they
wouldn't
could
have to
take
fight them. We don't have to stop them. We don't have to rally against them and
no,
just stop participating.
yeah,
Yeah.
and tell them to take a dog shit with them.
You don't even have to do that.
No,
Just stop.
that they put in their food, you know.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying you don't even have to. You don't have to say anything.
I
Right?
was just gonna use.
I'm going to go over here now, and that's just going to stop existing because the
yeah.
energy is pulled away from it, right?
Yeah, because
Which is
you've called that part of the illusion out,
right.
right? And I was just going to use a similar analogy. It might be a bit deeper. This Russia-Ukraine bullshit that's going on at the moment, right? If both sides, Ukraine and Russian soldiers, all put their guns on the floor at the same time and said, you know what? Not for me.
Right.
What happens?
Just stops happening.
That big general with all the stars and the pretty ribbons and the big loud voice screaming, pick the guns back up, is it ignored? It'll disappear.
Yeah.
The conflict disappears.
Right.
You can't fight for peace.
Right.
It's an oxymoron. It's the biggest one that's ever been abused.
Yeah.
You have to fight for peace.
No.
Stand up for him, stand up for her, banner, placard, demonstration, march. It's all a waste of time, always was. And I know because I've been involved in most of them.
Sure.
Yeah. Just
where
by
it's
saying
not, where it's not an oxymoron is the only place you can truly fight for peace is within yourself, right?
Within yourself, because your battle is within yourself, within your own universe.
Yeah. To not choose to not choose to put it out there.
Yeah. Because the minute you acknowledge that as being the right thing to do, your Wetikó is feeding into it. Go on, shoot him.
Right.
Go on, shoot him. Before he shoots you, shoot him.
Right.
And they do. Because the genuine, honest person within them believes that what they're doing is right. To defend king and country.
Right.
Fuck the king and his country. He should be the first. They've betrayed us. Every kakistocracy, every monarchy, every oligarchy, every one of them have betrayed the people because they got people in positions who were prepared to set fire to you and step over you for financial gain or status. That's another silver lining.
Yeah.
The minority of parasites that are fed off us. I call them the amoeba on the backside of humanity.
Right.
Feeding off us, and we continue feeding them by continue to breed and reproduce children, so they can exploit while we abuse them.
Right.
Hands up who's guilty.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do? We knew no better, but we did because I knew better inside me. But I wouldn't allow my conscious awareness to help me understand why it was wrong.
Yeah.
And for that, I'm guilty, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we've gone on a bit of a rant there, haven't we?
I love it, brother. Thank you so much. I wanted to mention it's synchronous with the call we're going to have later with Mark for your birth chart, because I realized after our last conversation that was for my little project here, that was my 9th recording. And today is the 11th recording. And 2 weeks ago or whatever it was that we had that conversation in the Mayan calendar, it was out of the 13 numbers, it was the 9 day. And today is an 11 day, which I just think is so cool, man. Like just in terms of divine timing and divine alignment, you know, that it's just these little synchronies that reinforce that no matter how dark it might look, there's support beyond anything we can conceive of. That's leading.
And that is a lovely silver lining for you. But
Yeah.
I have to hold my hands up and confess I don't know shit from old rope when it comes to Mayan calendars. Right?
I know. That's what I'm saying is so beautiful that I just wanted to mention it because you're going to learn a lot more today. you know, like about it later. So I'm excited for that. And yeah, I love this, man. I love this connection we have, and I love these conversations, and I just appreciate you so much.
Yeah, well, I am planning on coming over anyway. So
For sure.
as long as there's no COVID bullshit in the airport, I'll be over.
They apparently just dropped it here in the US so that people can come
Oh,
in. So
it's gone a bit.
yeah, finally.
Yeah, the power behind that bullshit is gone now.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, buddy. Should we leave it there for this one?
Sounds perfect, man. Thank you so much,
And
Nico.
well, I'll see you in the morning, won't I?
Love you, brother.
Thanks very much, Pat. I really enjoyed that as
Me
always.
too. Me too.
All right,
Thank you.
buddy.
Bye.
Catch you later.
Okay.
Ta-ra, man.